To run the best nation, you need the best people, the best counselors, the best royal court, the best knights. What most people don't know is that you can recruit people through marrying off a secretly overpowered resource, your unmarried courtiers. Most people completely ignore courtiers when they begin playing CK3, but you can use them to find talented, unlanded people in other nations through marriage. Your court is your HR department, and your courtiers are your overpowered recruiters. So, let's take a look. Here is your courtiers tab, and if you go to your courtiers, you can see everyone who is in your court. This normally isn't that interesting. These are people who just happen to be living in your court, eating your food, but it gets interesting when we take a look at the unmarried people. I'm going to look at the unmarried women, and you can see right here, I have 2 unmarried women who are in my court. These other women are staying around, but they aren't staying around permanently. You have to pay them money if they want them to join. Now, these people can bring in talent into the nation. So, let's take a look at Mutlu and find her a spouse. One thing I notice is if I look at my council, my marshal is actually my steward is not very good. So maybe I find someone who's a bit better. I'll sort by stewardship, and it looks like there is this guy who has 18 stewardship. So I'm going to propose a matrilineal marriage, and this is important. By having a matrilineal marriage, this gentleman will marry her and come to my court. If I don't check this, she will leave and go to his court. So I'm going to have matrilineal. I'll send off the proposal, and we'll go forward a couple days. What's going to happen is they will get married, and this gentleman is now part of my court. And we can say goodbye to this guy and assign this new fella that we just brought in. So you can see here, we can use this to bring in people that have very high stats. And it's not just council members that we can bring in. Another thing we can use to bring in is we can bring in knights. If we sort by prowess, we can see this gentleman has 24 prowess. He's really good. So I'm going to propose a matrilineal marriage and send off the proposal. When I simulate ahead a couple days, suddenly he is now part of my court through marriage, and he has immediately become a knight. Not only has he become a knight, he has probably become one of my best knights. He's my second best knight. So you can see here that this is a really effective way to bring in people that have high stats. If you have a bad steward, bring in a new steward. A bad commander, bring in someone of good marshal. Need more knights? Bring in more knights. Now, in most cultures are male dominated, so you're going to have to use unmarried women to make these matches. You can't use men. There's only one role that you can typically use a man, or you can use a woman for. So, if I were to instead look at my unmarried male courtiers, we can see here that here's one of my knights does not have a spouse, and I can bring in someone who has very high intrigue. And also, this person is Craven. One thing you may not know is that Craven spy masters don't go against you. So this woman seems like an excellent spy master. Very high intrigue. She's an elusive shadow, and she's Craven. This sounds great. I'm not going to check matrilineal marriage because I want her to come to the man's court. I want her to come to my court. So I'll send off the proposal. And in a couple days, they will be married. Excellent. Now when I look at my court, I can now appoint Layla. And now I just boosted my spy master's intrigue from 3 to 23, and I put someone in who is Craven and will likely be afraid of me. So you also see here that if you have unmarried men, you can use them to often bring in spy masters. If you have a culture that's female dominated, you're going to want to bring in women to run everything, but most cultures in this game are male dominated, so this is probably what you're going to have to do. Another great use for marrying off your courtiers is to find people with skills that you need. So you may notice right now I don't have a court physician. So why don't I go look for one? You can use the filters here to search for lifestyle traits. I can use this to find someone who is a physician. Maybe I need someone who is a gardener. You can just look for whatever you need. So in this case, I was trying to find a physician, so I'm going to search for a physician. And sure enough, there is a gentleman here who is a physician. And if I do a matrilineal marriage to bring him over to the woman's court, bring him over into my court, I can send off the proposal. And a couple days later, there we go. I now have a physician in my court. He's not a super great one, but I didn't have to use the event to search for a physician. I didn't have to pay any extra money for this. I was just able to leverage the women who were in my court who were unmarried and use them to bring in good talent. So now I should be able to fill that court position. This goes for all these other court positions too. For instance, some of these court positions do better if you get someone who has a certain trait, like royal architect does better if the person is an architect. So you can use this to bring in people who are great for filling your royal court. Use this to look for just people with high stats and people with good skills. You may have noticed that hiring in courtiers into your court is not free. Oftentimes, it'll cost gold. This gentleman's pretty cheap at 6 gold, but some of the more talented people will cost you a lot more money. And if you're cheap, then you don't want to pay it. So there's another way to get unmarried people into your court, and that is to look in your prison. You see, typically when you go to war and you start sacking counties, you will start picking up prisoners of war. Most of them are useless. This gentleman has no land, no skills, no nothing. He's not useful to me. But down here, this woman, she's a young woman, unmarried. She even has good skills. One thing you can do is you can just look directly in your prisons to see if you can find people who have good skills. But I'm going to negotiate her release and I'm going to recruit her. Might as well demand her conversion as well. Now, when she gets recruited, I have now added someone to my court who is an unmarried woman. And now I can find her a spouse. So this is one way that you can bring unmarried people into your court, is to just recruit people out of your prison. So keep your eye out for young women who you capture during sieges, because you will be able to use them and add them to your court and use them to start recruiting, good knights, use them to start recruiting people that have good stats, or even bring in people who have good genetics. So there's a lot of things that you can do here when you have unmarried people in your court. So with that information, I hope you see that this tab here, this Courtiers tab, is one that you really shouldn't ignore. It's a very effective way to bring in people that have good skills to help you fill out your council with talented people. It's a great place to find good knights. You can use it to find people that have good genetics and bring them into your country. And you can also use it to find people that have specific skills. Again, maybe you want a commander with a certain commander trait, or you want to find someone who has a good trait for one of your court positions. This is the first place you should be looking. You should be looking at your unmarried courtiers and looking around and seeing if you can find a good match so that you can bring in people who are talented.